The ships came on a Tuesday morning. They filled the sky over every major city on Earth, blocking out the sun with their massive hulls. The Velcris Empire had arrived, and humanity knew immediately that resistance was futile. Jiho stood in the ruins of what used to be the Seoul Defense Command Center. Smoke still rose from the buildings around him. The battle had lasted 6 hours. 6 hours against an enemy that had been conquering worlds for thousands of years. He looked at his hand, still shaking from the adrenaline, and wondered how everything had fallen apart so quickly. "Commander Murray is calling for you," said a young soldier, barely old enough to serve. The kid's uniform was torn and bloodied, but he still stood at attention. Jiho nodded and followed him through the rubble. Mirai stood in front of a makeshift command table, studying holographic projections of the remaining Earth forces. Her face was hard, carved from stone by years of military service. A long scar ran down her left cheek, a souvenir from the failed defense of Beijing 3 weeks ago. She didn't look up when Jiho approached. "They're asking us to attend a ceremony," she said quietly. "Prime Minister Hyunwoo has agreed to formal surrender. Tomorrow at the old United Nations building in Neo-Seoul." Jiho felt his stomach turn. "A ceremony? They want us to kneel. All of Earth's leaders, all the military commanders, everyone who represents humanity. We kneel before their queen." Mirai's voice was flat, emotionless. She'd already processed her rage and grief. Now there was only cold acceptance, and if we refuse... Mirai finally looked at him. Her eyes were tired. "They burn another city. They've made that very clear. Hyunwoo believes this is the only way to save what's left of humanity." Jiho wanted to argue, but what could he say? The Velcris had destroyed Earth's combined fleets in less than a week. Their weapons turned matter into energy. Their shields couldn't be penetrated by anything humans had developed. This wasn't a fair fight. This was an execution, and humanity was already dead. They just hadn't stopped breathing yet. The next day, Jiho put on his dress uniform. It felt wrong wearing ceremonial clothes to surrender. But orders were orders, and he was still a soldier. Mirai was already waiting by the transport vehicle, wearing her own uniform, metals gleaming in the gray morning light. "You don't have to come," she said. "This is for commanders and officials. You could stay behind." "So could you," Jiho replied. Mirai almost smiled. "We stand together, or we don't stand at all." The ceremony hall was massive, built decades ago when humanity still believed in unity and cooperation. Now it was just a tomb where Earth's dignity would be buried. Thousands of people filled the space. Jiho recognized faces from the news. Generals who had fought bravely, scientists who had tried to develop new weapons, politicians who had attempted diplomacy. All of them wore the same expression of defeat. At the front of the hall stood the Velcris. They were tall, easily over 2 meters, with skin that shimmered like oil on water. Their armor seemed to be part of their bodies, growing from their flesh in geometric patterns. And at the center, sitting on a throne that floated above the ground, was Queen Thessara. She was ancient. Jiho could feel it just by looking at her. This was a being who had seen empires rise and fall, who had witnessed the birth and death of countless civilizations. Her eyes glowed with a soft purple light, and when she moved, the air itself seemed to bend around her. "People of Earth," she said, and her voice filled the hall without any need for speakers or amplification. "You have fought well. Your species showed courage in the face of overwhelming power. For this I grant you mercy. You will not be eliminated. You will serve." Prime Minister Hyunwoo stepped forward. He was an old man, his hair white, his face lined with worry. He had been a good leader in peacetime, but war had broken him. He knelt first, lowering himself to the ground before the alien queen. One by one, the others followed. Generals and admirals, scientists and diplomats, all of them bowing their heads and bending their knees. The sound of people kneeling filled the hall like falling rain. Jiho felt Mirai tense beside him. "We should kneel," he whispered, "for humanity." "No," Mirai whispered back. "Not for this." The Velcris guards noticed them standing. One pointed, and others turned their weapons toward the 2 defiant humans. The crowd murmured nervously. Queen Thessara's glowing eyes fixed on their location. She rose from her throne, floating down toward them. The crowd parted like water. Every step she took echoed with power. When she was close enough, Jiho could see the details of her face, the patterns that moved beneath her skin, the wisdom and cruelty mixed in her expression. "You dare defy me, human?" Her voice was soft now, almost curious. "Your world is mine. Your species serves at my pleasure. Kneel." But she wasn't looking at Jiho. Her finger pointed directly at Mirai. Mirai met the Queen's gaze without flinching. Then she turned, looking not at Thessera, but at Prime Minister Hyunwoo still kneeling on the ground. "How dare you, human?" Mirai said. Her voice carried across the silent hall. "How dare you kneel for all of us? How dare you surrender our dignity without asking if we wanted to keep fighting?" Hyunwoo looked up, his face twisted with anguish. "I saved our species." "You saved our bodies," Mirai replied. "But you killed our spirit." The Velcris guards moved forward, but Queen Thessera raised a hand, stopping them. For a long moment she studied Mirai and Jiho. Then unexpectedly she laughed. It was a sound like music and thunder combined. "Interesting," she said. "I have conquered 473 worlds. Every species either fights until extinction or surrenders completely. You humans are the first to do both." She circled around Mirai, examining her like a curious scientist studying a new specimen. "You intrigue me, warrior. What is your name?" "Commander Mirai of the Unified Earth Defense Force. And you?" Thessera looked at Jiho. "Captain Jiho, same force." "Tell me, Commander Mirai, do you wish to die standing rather than live kneeling?" Mirai's jaw tightened. "I wish to live free, but if that's not possible, then yes, I'll die standing." Queen Thessera was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke, her voice filling the hall once more. "The Velcris Empire has an ancient tradition, the trial of worth. Any species may attempt to prove their value through service. Commander Mirai, Captain Jiho, you will serve as my personal guards for 1 solar cycle. If you succeed, Earth will be granted vassal status with limited autonomy. If you fail, humanity will serve as slaves for 10 generations. The hall erupted in shocked voices. Hyunwoo stood up, protesting. "Your Majesty, this is too dangerous. We've already surrendered."
"And I have already decided," Thessera said coldly.
"These two will represent humanity's worth. Their success or failure will determine your species' fate." She looked back at Mirai and Jiho. "Do you accept?" Jiho looked at Mirai. She was crazy for defying the Queen. This trial could doom everyone. But she was also right. What good was survival if humanity lost everything that made them human? Mirai nodded once. "We accept." Queen Thessera smiled. "Good, bring them to my ship. We leave within the hour." She turned to address the crowd one final time. "The ceremony is over. Return to your homes and pray that your champions do not disappoint me." As Velcris guards surrounded them, Jiho whispered to Mirai, "You know we just bet the entire human race on our ability to guard an alien queen, right?" Mirai's expression didn't change. "Better than betting on our ability to live as slaves." The guards led them away, out of the hall and toward the massive ship waiting in the sky. Behind them, the crowd watched in silence. Some looked hopeful. Most looked terrified. And Prime Minister Hyunwoo sat back down on the ground, his head in his hands, wondering if he had just witnessed humanity's salvation or its final doom. The ship was beyond anything Jiho had ever imagined. The walls seemed alive, pulsing with soft light. Corridors stretched in directions that hurt his eyes to follow, bending in ways that shouldn't be possible. Gravity shifted as they walked, making every step feel strange and disorienting. "Your quarters," said the Velcris guard, gesturing to a doorway that appeared from nowhere in the smooth wall. "You have 6 hours to rest. Then your training begins." Jiho and Mirai stepped inside. The room was simple but comfortable, with 2 beds that floated a few inches off the floor and a window showing the earth shrinking below them. Neither of them spoke for several minutes. They just watched their home planet getting smaller and smaller. "Do you think we made the right choice?" Jiho finally asked. Mirai sat on one of the floating beds, testing its strange surface. "I think we made the only choice we could live with. Whether it's right, we'll find out soon enough." Back on Earth, Jiho's younger brother Daehyun was in a hidden laboratory beneath the ruins of the old Seoul Institute of Technology. He was a scientist, one of the few who had survived the invasion with his research intact. When he heard about his brother's trial, he knew what he had to do. "We need to find their weakness," he said to his team. "The Velcris have conquered hundreds of worlds, but every technology has a flaw. We just need to find it." His assistant, a young woman named Yuna, looked skeptical. "And if your brother fails the trial? If humanity becomes enslaved because of this?" "Then we need to be ready to fight anyway," Daehyun replied. "My brother bought us time. We can't waste it." Above the earth, in hidden bases and underground bunkers, the resistance was forming. A woman named Borum, A former Special Forces operative was gathering soldiers and civilians who refused to accept defeat. They called themselves the Free Earth Movement, and they were preparing for war. On the Velcris flagship, the training began. A tall Velcris commander named Sora entered their quarters without warning. Her armor gleaming, her expression cold. "I am Commander Sora, second in command of the Eternal Dominion and personal guard to Queen Thesara for 97 years. You humans will be under my supervision. I will teach you our protocols, our combat methods, and our way of service. If you cannot learn, you will fail. If you fail, your species suffers. Any questions?" "Just one," Mirai said. "Do you want us to succeed?" Sora's expression didn't change. "I want what is best for the Empire. If that means your success, then yes. If it means your failure proves humans are worthless, then I accept that too. Now follow me." The training was brutal. Velcris combat was nothing like human fighting. It was faster, more efficient, more deadly. Their weapons responded to thought as much as touch. Their armor connected directly to their nervous systems. Jiho and Mirai had to learn everything from scratch, like children learning to walk. "You're too slow," Sora said after Jiho failed to block a training strike for the 10th time. "You think before you act. By the time your brain sends signals to your muscles, you're already dead." "Then how do we improve?" Jiho asked, frustrated. "You don't think, you react. You become the weapon, not just hold it." Sora demonstrated her movements so fast they blurred. Again, days turned into weeks. Slowly, painfully, they improved. Jiho discovered he had a gift for tactics, seeing patterns in Velcris combat that even Sora hadn't fully analyzed. Mirai's raw determination translated into a fighting style that was unconventional, but effective. They weren't Velcris warriors, but they were becoming something else, something new. The first real test came during a diplomatic mission to a newly conquered world called Ethos. The planet's leaders had requested an audience with Queen Thesara to negotiate their surrender terms. It was supposed to be routine, a simple formality. Mirai and Jiho stood guard behind the Queen as she met with the Ethos representatives in a grand hall. The aliens were insectoid with multiple limbs and compound eyes that reflected the light in rainbow colors. They seemed nervous but cooperative. "You will retain local governance," Thesara was saying. "Your laws will remain, as long as they don't contradict imperial edicts. In return, you will provide resources and soldiers to the Empire." One of the Ethos delegates nodded. "We accept these terms, Your Majesty. We only ask for—" The attack came from everywhere at once. The walls exploded inward. Assassins poured through the breaches, armed with weapons designed specifically to kill Velcris. Sora's guards reacted instantly, but they were outnumbered and caught by surprise. Jiho didn't think. He moved on instinct, throwing himself in front of Thesara as energy bolts streaked through the air. His armor, still unfamiliar and uncomfortable, absorbed the shots. Mirai was already moving, tackling an assassin who had gotten too close to the Queen. The fight lasted less than a minute, but it felt like hours. When it was over, 12 assassins lay dead, and 3 of Sora's elite guards were badly wounded. Jiho had a burned arm, and Mirai was bleeding from a cut on her forehead. But Queen Thesara was unharmed. She looked at them both with an expression that might have been respect. "You didn't follow protocol. Sora's training was to protect me from a distance using ranged weapons and shields. You threw yourselves into danger." "Sorry, Your Majesty," Jiho said, wincing from the pain in his arm. "We're still learning." "Don't apologize," Thesara said. "Your method was crude, inefficient, and completely against doctrine. It also saved my life. Commander Sora, what do you think of our human guards?" Sora stood among the bodies, her armor smoking from several hits. She looked at Jiho and Mirai for a long moment. "I think they fight without honor, Your Majesty. They don't follow our traditions or respect our combat forms. They are chaotic and unpredictable." "And?" Thesara prompted. "And they fight to win," Sora admitted. "Perhaps there is worth in that." That night, as medical drones repaired Jiho's burned arm, he received a coded message on a stolen Velcris communication device. It was from Daehyun. "Brother, we found something. The Velcris power systems have a unique frequency signature. Human neural patterns create interference that their shields can't compensate for. It's small, barely noticeable, but it's there. If we can weaponize it, we might have a chance. Be careful. The resistance is growing stronger. People are ready to fight." Jiho deleted the message immediately, but his mind was racing. His brother had found a weakness. Earth had a chance. but using it would mean betraying Thesara, violating the trial and potentially condemning humanity to slavery if the resistance failed. He looked over at Mirai, who was having her cut treated. She caught his eye and raised an eyebrow. Something wrong? Just thinking, Jiho said, about what happens if we succeed at this trial. We get limited autonomy. We keep some dignity, but we're still part of the Empire, still conquered. Is that enough? Mirai was quiet for a moment. I don't know, but it's better than extinction, and maybe if we prove ourselves valuable enough, we can negotiate for more. Weeks passed. They traveled to other worlds, witnessed other conquests, and saw the Empire from the inside. It wasn't simple. Some species thrived under Velcris rule, achieving peace and prosperity they'd never known. Others suffered, their cultures erased, their people broken. Thesara ruled with absolute authority, but she wasn't unnecessarily cruel. She genuinely believed she was bringing order to a chaotic galaxy. One evening, after a particularly long day, Thesara summoned Mirai to her private chambers. Jiho waited outside, nervous, while the two spoke alone. You remind me of someone, Thesara said, pouring a liquid that glowed faintly in crystal glasses, a warrior from a species I conquered long ago. She also refused to kneel. She also believed her people deserved freedom. What happened to her? Mirai asked. She died fighting for her people's independence. Her species was destroyed in the war that followed. I have often wondered if things would have been different if she had accepted my rule and worked within the system instead of against it. Thesara handed Mirai a glass. Do you plan to be like her? Mirai looked at the drink, then at the Queen. I plan to be someone my people can be proud of. Whether that means working within your system or against it, I don't know yet. Honest, Thesara said. I appreciate honesty. Most beings lie to me because they fear me. You fear me too, but you still speak the truth. Fear is not the same as respect, Mirai said carefully. No, Thesara agreed, but it's a start. The trial period was halfway complete when everything changed. Jiho received another message from Daehyun, more urgent this time. The resistance is ready. We have weapons that can exploit the weakness. Borum wants to strike at the occupation forces. Earth can be free, but we need your help from the inside. We need you to sabotage the flagship's defenses. Respond if you're willing to help. Jiho stared at the message for a long time. This was it. The choice between following through with the trial or fighting for true freedom. He couldn't make this decision alone. He showed the message to Mirai. She read it twice, her expression unreadable. Finally, she said, if we help them and succeed, humanity is free. If we help them and fail, humanity is enslaved. If we don't help them and complete the trial, humanity gets limited autonomy. Those are our options, and what do? Mirai looked out the window at the stars. We find a third option. We prove to Thesara that humanity deserves real partnership, not just mercy. We show her that we can be allies, not just servants. And how do we do that? I don't know yet. Mirai Adam 3 months into the trial, Jiho no longer felt like he was drowning. The Velcris technology that had seemed impossible to understand was now almost natural. He could read the ship's displays, understand the combat protocols, and even anticipate Thesara's needs before she voiced them. But understanding the enemy was making everything more complicated. You're thinking too much again, Mirai said as they walked through the ship's observation deck. Below them, a planet burned. The Velcris were putting down a rebellion on a world called Kethros. Jiho could see the explosions from orbit, tiny flashes of light that represented thousands of deaths. How do you not think about it? He asked. We're guarding someone who's destroying entire civilizations. Because thinking about it doesn't change it, Mirai replied. We can't stop her. We can barely keep up with her guards. All we can do is survive the trial and hope that gives us enough leverage to help Earth. Is that enough for you? Mirai was quiet for a long time. No, but it has to be. Commander Sora approached them, her armor gleaming as always. Over the months, she had become less hostile, though she was never what anyone would call friendly. Queen Thesara requests Commander Mirai's presence in her private study. Immediately. Mirai exchanged a glance with Jiho, then followed Sora. The Queen's study was a massive room filled with holographic displays showing maps of the Empire, data streams from 1,000 worlds, and military reports updating in real time. Thesara stood at the center, manipulating the displays with gestures. Do you know how old I am, Commander Mirai? The Queen asked without turning around. No, Your Majesty. 3,417 of your Earth years. I have lived through the rise and fall of empires you cannot imagine. I have seen species evolve and go extinct. I have witnessed wonders and horrors beyond your comprehension. She finally turned to face Miri, and in all that time, I have learned one truth. Freedom is a luxury that leads to chaos. Miri remained silent, sensing that Thesara wanted to talk, not argue. I was not born a queen, Thesara continued. I was a general during the Great Fracture, when the Velcris Collective tried to govern through democratic councils. Every world had a voice, every species had representation. It was beautiful in theory. Her eyes dimmed slightly. In practice, it was disaster. Species with conflicting interests deadlocked every decision. Resources were wasted on debates while planets starved. Military responses were delayed by committees while civilians died. And then came the war. She pulled up a holographic image of a dead world, its surface scarred and lifeless. The War of Five Councils lasted 73 years. 14 billion beings died. Entire species were eradicated. And for what? For the right to argue endlessly about who deserved what resources. So you took control, Miri said. I ended the war. I imposed order. I created a system where decisions are made efficiently, where resources are distributed rationally, where conflicts are resolved before they become catastrophic. I have saved more lives than I have taken, Commander. My empire is not built on cruelty. It is built on necessity. But the beings under your rule have no choice, Miri said carefully. And because of that, they have peace. They have stability. Their children grow up without fear of war or famine. Is that not worth the price of obedience? Miri thought about her response carefully. Your Majesty, with respect, I think you're asking the wrong question. The question isn't whether peace is worth the price of obedience. The question is whether peace without freedom is actually peace or just a different kind of prison. Thesara studied her for a long moment. You speak boldly for someone whose species knelt before me. One man knelt, Miri corrected. The rest of us are still figuring out what we believe. For the first time since Miri had met her, Queen Thesara smiled, genuinely. Not a cold political smile, but something warmer, sadder. You remind me why I offered your species this trial. Most beings I conquer either resist until extinction or submit completely. You humans do something strange. You submit and resist at the same time. You accept reality while refusing to accept defeat. It's infuriating and fascinating. Thank you, Your Majesty. I think. Tell me, if I granted Earth full independence tomorrow, what would your species do? Miri didn't hesitate. We'd probably start fighting among ourselves within a year. We'd make mistakes, waste resources, and struggle to cooperate. We'd be messy and chaotic and inefficient. Then why desire independence at all? Because those mistakes would be ours. That chaos would be our choice. And maybe eventually we'd learn from it and become something better. But we'd never get that chance if someone else is always making our choices for us. Thesara turned back to her holographic displays. You may go, Commander. I have much to consider. As Miri left, she felt more confused than ever. She had expected to find a monster ruling the Empire. Instead, she'd found a being who genuinely believed she was doing the right thing. That somehow made everything worse. On Earth, Daehyun was running out of time. His research had progressed rapidly. The human resistance now had weapons that could disrupt Velcris shields and targeting systems. But deploying them required coordination, and coordination required communication with Jiho and Miri. They haven't responded to any messages in weeks, Yuna said, pulling up communication logs. Either they can't receive them or they're choosing not to respond. Or they've been compromised, Borum added. She had joined Daehyun's lab to coordinate between the scientific and military wings of the resistance. For all we know, the Velcris discovered our communications and they're being monitored. My brother wouldn't turn on us, Daehyun insisted. Not willingly, Borum agreed. But the Velcris have ways of ensuring loyalty. We need to proceed assuming we're on our own. Across Earth, the resistance was growing. Humans who had initially accepted defeat were becoming restless under Velcris occupation. The aliens weren't cruel, but they were absolute. Every aspect of life was regulated, controlled, and monitored. Some humans adapted, others quietly rebelled. A new player had entered the game, someone Thesara hadn't anticipated. Kaler was a Velcris general who had served under Thesara for centuries, but he had grown disillusioned with her absolute rule. He believed the Empire had become the very thing it once fought against. a tyrannical force that crushed individual freedom in the name of order. Kaelor had been secretly building his own faction within the Velcris military, warriors who believed the Empire needed to change. When he learned about the human trial, he saw an opportunity. If humans could expose the weaknesses in Thesara's philosophy, it might be the catalyst for reform. Or better yet, revolution. He made contact with the human resistance through encrypted channels, offering them something valuable: intelligence about Velcris military movements and weaknesses in their occupation forces. Why would a Velcris general help us? Borum asked when she received the first message. Because the enemy of your enemy is your friend, Daehyun said. Or because it's a trap. Either way, we need to be careful. Back on the Eternal Dominion, a crisis was brewing. A group of Velcris nobles had arrived to meet with Queen Thesara, and they had brought with them a group of human prisoners taken from Earth. The nobles wanted to make an example of the prisoners, executing them publicly to remind humanity of their place. Jiho and Mirai were present in the throne room when the nobles made their demand. One of them, a decorated commander named Varesh, spoke with absolute confidence. Your Majesty, these humans were caught attempting sabotage against our occupation forces. According to Imperial law, the punishment is immediate execution. We request permission to carry out the sentence in front of their people as a warning. Thesara considered this. The law is clear. Permission granted. No, Mirai said. The word came out before she could stop it. The entire throne room went silent. Every Velcris present turned to stare at her. Commander Sora's hand moved to her weapon. Varesh looked personally offended that a human guard had dared to speak. Explain yourself, Thesara said coldly. Mirai stepped forward, her heart pounding. Your Majesty, these prisoners are human. They fall under the jurisdiction of the trial. Their fate should be decided as part of determining humanity's worth, not as a separate political statement. That is not how the law works, Varesh said sharply. These humans violated Imperial law. They are subject to Imperial justice. Their trial has nothing to do with— It has everything to do with it, Mirai interrupted. You want to execute humans to send a message. That message will influence how humanity responds to Imperial rule, which directly affects the outcome of the trial. If you execute prisoners while we're being judged on our ability to serve the Empire, you're contaminating the test. Thesara leaned back in her throne, her expression unreadable. An interesting argument. Commander Sora, your opinion? Sora looked frustrated but spoke honestly. Commander Mirai's logic is not without merit. The trial is meant to judge humanity's worth through the actions of their representatives. External factors could indeed influence the results. Varesh was furious. This is absurd. A human guard does not dictate Imperial policy. No, Thesara agreed, I do. And I find Commander Mirai's argument compelling. The executions will be postponed, Yanti. The trial was entering its final month when everything fell apart. Jiho woke to alarms blaring throughout the Eternal Dominion. Red lights flashed in sequences he'd learned meant critical emergency. Before he could fully process what was happening, Commander Sora burst into their quarters. The Empress is in danger. Both of you full armor now. We're under attack. From who? Mirai asked, already pulling on her equipment. Everyone, Sora said grimly. The Situation Room was chaos. Holographic displays showed Velcris ships engaging unknown attackers near Earth. On the planet's surface, resistance forces were striking at occupation centers with weapons that shouldn't exist, and somewhere in the confusion, a Velcris fleet marked with Kaelor's insignia was moving toward the Eternal Dominion itself. It's a coordinated rebellion, Thesara said, her voice calm despite the disaster unfolding. General Kaelor has been planning this for years. He's using the human uprising as cover for his own coup attempt. Clever. Your Majesty, we need to evacuate you to a secure location, Sora urged. No, I will not run from traitors and primitives. Prepare all defenses. Send the fleet to— The ship shuddered. Something had hit them, something powerful enough to penetrate their shields. Thesara's eyes widened slightly, the first real surprise Jiho had seen on her face. How? She whispered. On Earth, Daehyun was in a transport vehicle racing toward the main Velcris command center in Neo Sol. Around him, resistance fighters were armed with weapons he'd designed. Devices that emitted frequencies perfectly tuned to disrupt Velcris neural interfaces. The aliens weren't expecting it. They couldn't adapt fast enough. Phase 1 complete, Borum reported over the communication network. We've disabled 17 occupation centers. Casualties are minimal on our side. But Daehyun, the Velcris fleet is regrouping. We have maybe an hour before they adjust their defenses and counterattack. Then we finish this in an hour, Daehyun said. He thought about his brother up there on the alien flagship. Was Jiho safe? Would he understand why the resistance had to act now, even knowing it might doom the trial? A message came through on a priority channel. It was from Prime Minister Hyunwoo. All resistance forces stand down immediately. You are violating the terms of surrender and endangering the trial. I repeat, stand down. Boram's voice cut through the channel. With respect, Prime Minister, we stop taking orders from people who kneel. Free Earth movement, continue the assault. The Eternal Dominion was dying. Not quickly, but inevitably. The human weapons had created cascading failures in systems throughout the ship. Backup power was failing. Life support was compromised in several sections. And Kaelor's fleet was closing in, ready to finish what the humans had started. We need to abandon ship, Sora said, her voice strained. She had been injured defending the bridge and her armor was scorched black. Your Majesty, please. We can escape on the command shuttle and regroup with loyal forces. And leave the flagship to fall into Kaelor's hands. This ship contains Imperial secrets, weapon systems, and intelligence that could tear the Empire apart. Thesera looked at Mirai and Jiho. Your trial is over. Both of you get to an escape pod and return to Earth. You performed adequately. I will grant your species vassal status if I survive this. If you survive, Jiho repeated, the chances are poor. Kaelor will not rest until I am dead. But that is not your concern. Go. Mirai didn't move. You said we were your guards. That means we guard you until the trial is officially complete. The time period isn't up for 3 more weeks. The trial period is irrelevant if I'm dead, Thesera said. Your species will gain nothing from dying here with me. Maybe not, Mirai said. But we'll lose something if we run. We'll lose the knowledge that we stood by our duty, even when it was hard. And honestly, Your Majesty, I think you need that kind of stubborn loyalty right now, Jiho wanted to argue. Every rational part of his brain was screaming at him to get on an escape pod and let the aliens sort out their own problems. But Mirai was right. If they ran now, they proved that human loyalty only lasted as long as it was convenient. We're staying, he said. Thesera looked at them both for a long moment. Then she nodded. Very well. Commander Sora, prepare for boarding action. If Kaelor wants this ship, we'll make him pay for every corridor. On Earth, Prime Minister Hyunwoo watched the battle in orbit with growing horror. The human resistance was winning. Velcris forces were in retreat. Earth was actually achieving something impossible. But he knew what came next. When Thesera regained control, when the Velcris Empire brought its full might to bear, humanity would be crushed so completely that extinction would be merciful. He opened a priority channel to the resistance. Boram, you need to understand what you've done. The trial was working. We were going to gain autonomy, but now you've attacked them, allied with a Velcris traitor and threatened their queen. There's no coming back from this. There was never any coming back, Boram replied. Autonomy isn't freedom, Prime Minister. It's just slavery with better decorations. We're fighting for our right to make our own future, even if that future is uncertain. You're fighting for extinction. Maybe, but we're fighting. That's more than you can say. The channel cut off. Hyunwoo sat alone in his office, wondering if he'd been wrong. Maybe surrendering had been the coward's choice. Maybe Mirai and Boram understood something he didn't. Or maybe they were all fools who would get humanity killed. Kaelor's forces boarded the Eternal Dominion through the damaged sections. They were elite warriors trained for centuries, and they moved through the ship like water flowing downhill. But they weren't prepared for human tactics. Jiho had learned Velcris combat, but he'd also remembered human strategies. While Velcris fought with honor and protocol, humans fought to win. He set traps in corridors, used the ship's damaged systems to create ambushes, and coordinated with Sora's remaining guards in ways that confused the attackers. They're not fighting like Velcris, one of Kaelor's commanders reported. They're using guerrilla tactics, asymmetric warfare. It's dishonorable. It's effective, Kaelor replied coldly. Adapt or die. The battle raged through the ship for hours. Thesera fought alongside her guards, her centuries of experience making her a devastating force. But they were outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of time. In one desperate moment, Mirai found herself face to face with Kaelor himself. The rebel general was massive, his armor ancient and powerful, his weapons capable of tearing through steel like paper. Human, he said, almost amused. You defend the tyrant who conquered your world? Where's your pride? My pride is in keeping my word, Mirai said, raising her weapon. We promised to guard her. We don't break promises just because they become inconvenient. Then you're a fool. Thessera will never give your species true freedom. She'll never see you as equals. You're fighting for a master who views you as pets at best. Maybe, but I'm not fighting for her. I'm fighting for what my word means. If humans can't be trusted to keep their promises, then we don't deserve anyone's respect. Kalor attacked. Mirai dodged, but barely. She was good, had trained hard, but she was fighting a being with centuries of experience and technology she couldn't match. Within seconds, she was on the defensive, bleeding from multiple wounds, her armor failing. A shot rang out. Kalor staggered. Jiho had arrived with Sora, and together they drove the rebel general back. It wasn't a victory, just a temporary reprieve, but it was enough to get Mirai to safety. Foolish humans, Sora muttered as she sealed Mirai's wounds with emergency medical gel. You should have escaped when you had the chance. Your species gains nothing from your deaths here. Our species gains the knowledge that we're not quitters, Jiho said. Sometimes that's worth more than survival. Back on Earth, Daehyun's forces had seized the main Velcris command center. They had weapons, they had momentum, and they had hope. But then the message came through on all channels, broadcast across every screen and device on the planet. It was from a human on the Eternal Dominion, a liaison officer named Yuna, who had been stationed on the flagship. Her face was bruised and bloody, but her voice was clear. People of Earth, this is Yuna speaking from the Eternal Dominion. You need to know the truth about what's happening here. The attack on the ship wasn't just a Velcris rebellion. It was coordinated with our resistance using weapons that exploited weaknesses our scientists discovered. But Commander Mirai and Captain Jiho are here, fighting to defend Queen Thessera. They're dying to protect the alien queen who conquered us because they gave their word, and I think they're right to do it. Daehyun's blood ran cold. His brother was on that ship, fighting against the very rebellion Daehyun had helped create. Yuna continued. The queen offered us a choice. Prove our worth through service and gain autonomy, or fight for uncertain freedom and risk extinction. Some of us chose to fight, but Mirai and Jiho chose a different path. They chose to show that humans keep their promises even when it's hard, even when it costs everything. I don't know if they'll survive this, but I know that their choice means something. It means we're not just another species that resists until extinction or submits until we're forgotten. We're something else. We're humans, and maybe that's worth more than winning this battle. The broadcast ended. Across Earth, resistance fighters paused. Some kept fighting. But others, seeing humans defending the alien queen instead of betraying her, the change was immediate. Throughout the Eternal Dominion, systems that had been failing suddenly stabilized. Shields that had collapsed flickered back to life. Weapons that had been offline powered up with a hum that echoed through damaged corridors. On the bridge, Thessera's tactical display lit up with renewed functionality. What is happening? Sora demanded, checking her readings. The human interference frequency is reversing. The systems are restoring themselves. Kalor realized it too. His advantage was evaporating. The ship he'd been about to capture was becoming a fortress again. He opened a channel to his fleet. All forces, retreat immediately. The window is closing, but it was too late. With systems restored, Thessera's loyalist fleet moved in. Kalor's ships, caught between the recovering flagship and reinforcements, were quickly overwhelmed. The rebel general himself was trapped aboard the Eternal Dominion with his remaining boarding parties. Jiho limped onto the bridge, his armor nearly destroyed, bleeding from wounds that should have killed him. Mirai was unconscious, carried by medical drones, but they'd survived. They'd held long enough. Thessera stood at the center of the bridge, her presence filling the space. Seal all exits. I want Kalor taken alive, and someone explained to me how our systems restored themselves when human weapons disabled them in the first place. The answer came in a transmission from Earth. Prime Minister. Hyunwoo's face appeared on the screen. Your Majesty, I speak on behalf of humanity. The attack on your ship was conducted by resistance forces using technology developed by our scientists, but it was not authorized by Earth's government, and it is not representative of human intentions. Our people chose to reverse the attack and restore your ship's systems. We did this not because we fear you, but because 2 of our warriors were aboard your ship honoring their commitment to the trial. We could not let them die defending you while we betrayed you. Thessera was silent for a long moment. You had the advantage. Your weapons were working. You were winning. And you chose to give that up? We chose honor over victory, Your Majesty, just as Commander Murray and Captain Jiho did. Across the galaxy on hundreds of Velcris-controlled worlds, beings watched the broadcast. They saw humans who had nearly defeated their conquerors choose instead to save their enemy's life. They saw a species that valued promises over power. Kalor was brought before Thesara in chains. The rebel general had fought for centuries to overthrow her, and he'd come within minutes of success. Now he stood defeated, his dreams of revolution shattered. You used humans as pawns, Thesara said coldly. You gave them weapons, encouraged their resistance, all to weaken my position. And they turned on you at the critical moment. How does it feel to be betrayed by the same tools you thought you'd use against me? Kalor glared at her. They weren't supposed to have principles. They were supposed to be desperate. I miscalculated. Yes, you did. Take him away. He'll stand trial for treason. After Kalor was removed, Thesara turned to Jiho, who was receiving medical treatment on the bridge. Mirai had regained consciousness and stood beside him, looking battered but unbroken. Your trial is complete, Thesara said. You served for the full period, defended me against impossible odds, and convinced your own people to save me even when they had the power to destroy me. I have conquered 473 worlds. Not one species has ever done what yours did today. So what happens now? Mirai asked. Thesara called for a full assembly. Within hours, representatives from every major species in the Empire gathered via holographic link. Velcris nobles, conquered species, military commanders, and civilian leaders all watched as Earth's fate was decided. I stand before you to render judgment on humanity, Thesara announced. 3 months ago they were conquered. They surrendered in the face of overwhelming force, as all species eventually do. But 2 of their warriors refused to kneel. They demanded a trial to prove their worth. I granted it, expecting them to fail as most species do. Instead, they have shown me something I had forgotten existed. She gestured to Mirai and Jiho. These humans had every reason to betray me. Their world was conquered. Their people were suffering. They possessed weapons that could kill me, yet they chose honor. They chose to keep their promise even when it cost them everything. And when their own resistance forces nearly destroyed my flagship, humanity chose to save me rather than win their freedom through treachery. The assembly was silent, thousands of beings processing what they were hearing. Therefore, I grant humanity autonomous status within the Empire. They will govern themselves, maintain their own military, and have full representation in imperial decisions. They are the first species in 500 years to earn this distinction. The announcement sent shockwaves through the Empire. Some species celebrated, hoping this meant change was possible. Others protested, claiming humans were being shown favoritism. The Velcris nobles were divided, some seeing wisdom in Thesara's decision, others viewing it as dangerous precedent. On Earth, the reaction was complex. Prime Minister Hyunwoo addressed the planet. We are not free. We are still part of the Velcris Empire, but we have earned the right to stand with dignity. We have proven that humans keep their word, even when it costs us. This is not the victory some hoped for, but it is a victory nonetheless. Borum and the Resistance had mixed feelings. They'd wanted full independence, not autonomy within an empire, but they couldn't deny that what Mirai and Jiho had achieved was significant. No conquered species had ever been granted such status so quickly. Daehyun met with his brother when Jiho finally returned to Earth. They stood on a hill overlooking Neo-Sol, watching ships from a dozen species moving through the sky. Now as partners rather than conquerors, I'm sorry, Daehyun said. My weapons nearly got you killed. You were trying to free humanity, Jiho replied. I can't be angry about that. But I'm glad you reversed it. I'm glad you chose honor. Was it worth it? Everything you went through up there? Jiho thought about the question. I don't know. We're still conquered. We still have Velcris ships in our sky. But we're standing now instead of kneeling. And that has to count for something. Mirai was summoned to Thesara's ship one final time. The Queen wanted to speak privately before returning to the Imperial capital. I owe you an apology, Thesara said, surprising Mirai completely. I have ruled for centuries believing that order required absolute control. That freedom led inevitably to chaos. You showed me I was wrong, or at least not entirely right. Your Majesty? Freedom does lead to chaos sometimes, but it also leads to growth, innovation, and the kind of honor you displayed. Absolute control creates stability. but it also creates stagnation. I've been so focused on preventing the chaos of the past that I've forgotten the value of allowing beings to make their own choices. The Sara looked out at the earth below. I'm not going to dismantle the Empire. Too many species depend on it for protection and resources. But I'm going to change it. Starting with humanity as the example. What kind of example? The example of what partnership looks like instead of subjugation. Other species will watch humanity govern themselves. If you succeed, if you show that autonomy within the Empire creates better results than absolute control, then other species will demand the same. And perhaps over time, the Empire will become something different, something better. And if we fail, then you prove my old methods were correct and nothing changes. Thessera smiled slightly. No pressure. As Mirai left the ship, she felt the weight of what humanity had achieved. They weren't free, but they had dignity. They weren't independent, but they had autonomy. And most importantly, they had proven to themselves and to the galaxy that humans were more than just another conquered species. 1 year later, Earth had transformed. Human ships patrolled their own space, working alongside Velcris vessels. Human representatives sat on imperial councils, their voices carrying weight. And slowly, carefully, other species began to request what humanity had earned. Commander Sora visited Earth for a diplomatic meeting. She walked through Neo Sol with Mirai, observing how the city had rebuilt itself with a blend of human and Velcris architecture. Your people are doing well, Sora admitted. Better than I expected. You're integrating Imperial technology while maintaining your own culture. It's unusual. We're stubborn that way, Mirai said. I noticed. You know, when I first met you, I thought humans were primitive and weak. I couldn't understand why Queen Thessera offered you the trial at all. And now I think you're still primitive and weak, Sora said with what might have been humor. But you're also stubborn, honorable, and infuriatingly principled. Those qualities have value too. I'll take that as a compliment. It was meant as one. In the years that followed, the Velcris Empire did begin to change. It was slow, almost imperceptible at first, but species that had been subjugated for generations started to stand a little straighter. They asked for more autonomy, pointed to humanity as proof that it could work. Thessera granted some requests and denied others, but the conversation had shifted. The Empire was no longer just about control. It was becoming about cooperation. Jiho eventually became the commander of Earth's defense forces. He trained new generations,